I'm working with NHLers, MLBers, NFLers, and I got them establishing nasal breathing all the time. And the most important aspect is that, let's say you're on the ice and it's a 40-second shift. If you really need to open your mouth, you can, but that's because you've trained all the time nose breathing. And then as soon as you get on the bench, I teach very specific exercises to normalize breathing through the nose. That way you can, number one, you can recover as fast as possible. And number two, you can listen to instructions from your coach. And number three, you reduce.
Thank you very much, Bryan, for taking the time to hop on this call with me. It's really cool to get a chance to talk to people who have been using hostage tape and based off of your notes have been recommending hostage tape to others. So it's really cool just to be able to get a chance to hop on with you today. Thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you said that you had been mouth taping for around a year. Is that correct?
It's actually been over 5 years.
Over 5 years. All right, very cool. That's crazy. So you're way before the origins of hostage tape. That's super cool.
Yeah.
What was it that got you into mouth taping?
Finding out that I had a completely deviated septum, and that when I was waking up in the morning, my mouth was always dry, which means I was breathing through my mouth all night. Plus, I would snore and have terrible insomnia.
Right. And did you read a book? Was it something on your own? Like, how did, because that's similar, similar to me, similar to a lot of people. Was it like a book or recommended? A lot of people find it through James Nestor. What was it that where you're like, all right, I'm gonna try
Yeah.
keeping my mouth shut at night?
I was long before Nestor's book. I'm a Dr. Lois Laney restorative breathing coach and an Oxygen Advantage master instructor. So I learned it from Dr. Lois and Patrick McEwen, that how beneficial it would be for me.
That's super cool. So you started mouth taping 5 years ago, and then probably like when was it that you came across hostage tape, and when was it that you started using hostage tape?
I think I've been using hostage tape now since the beginning of the year, so about 6 months.
Right.
And I love it. There's no other tape like it. It's hands down the best tape. So now I recommend it to everybody, and I bought the year's supply.
Sweet. Very cool. What about it? Now, this is kind of a layup question, but what about it? Because you've been mouth taping, that's 5 years is longer than anyone I've spoken to. So I imagine you've been through just a multitude of different tapes, trying everything. I know I was just grabbing stuff from my house at first, and then going to the drugstore, getting different medical grade stuff before I came across hostage tape. So what have you tried, and what about hostage tape have you noticed that makes it like so much better than the rest?
Well, I've tried all of them, pretty much every tape, and I was really using 3M paper tape. But I'd wake up in the morning, and after a while, my lips would be all chapped. And when I use hostage tape, that never happens.
Right.
And it's also easy to pull off and easy to put on, which
Yeah.
none of the tapes are easy to pull off and easy to put on, and they fall off. And hostage tape never falls off. And I like to have my lips fully covered.
Right.
There is a tape I use, myotape, for people that are afraid to cover their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And that also comes off very easy, but I prefer to have my mouth fully covered, and I recommend people to do that. So hostage tape is the best.
Right. Yeah, they have like some models have like a little X pattern that'll hold it on as well. People, they do find that sometimes a bit more comfortable just because it's like, well, my whole mouth isn't taped up. But I find that it's got to be the whole thing, or else it either comes off, or you just start feel yourself breathing out of the corners of your mouth or something along those lines.
It has to be fully taped.
That's yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear more about your work. So you're like what is it that you do? You're saying that you're recommending it and in oxygen specialist. So what is it? What's your title? What is it that you're doing? This sounds super cool.
Well, I'm a breathing instructor for 6 years. And so I coach people through breathing. I don't do breath work. I do restorative breath training exercises. and I identify people's breathing styles and irregular patterns, and I go through a host of criteria of physiological norms that people should be breathing. And the one main staple that I use is to get people to start taping their mouth immediately.
Right.
I'm using hostage tape for that. So I coach people how to breathe better, lower, slower, and deeper. And I take them from all types of debilitating illnesses and things like that. Athletes who are looking to achieve peak performance, and if they're not going to achieve peak performance if they're breathing through their mouth at night. So, and
Right. That's that's fascinating. So you could have it sound like you could see a wide range of people then. You're seeing the high performance athletes who are trying to breathe better. You could be seeing someone with like a multitude of different issues. Like would you if someone comes into you and they're maybe it's like anxiety or something, is that kind of what it is? It's like, all right, here's how to breathe through that or here's how changing the way you breathe can eliminate these things. Is that kind of how it works?
here's how changing the way you breathe eliminates those things, because it's the way you breathe that created those things.
Right.
It's not anything else. It can start in childhood. Like, I was a terrible breather. My mom smoked all through pregnancy. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with a heavy camel smoker. So I was never breathing correctly, and I was always breathing through my mouth. And I remember that. And
Hmm.
then all through athletics, wrestling for years and years, I was also over breathing and overstressed. So years of chronically mouth breathing can really debilitate you. And that's what leads to stress. That's what leads to anxiety, ADHD, bipolar disorder. You're not born with any of those things. You develop those things over a course of life, and you can also reverse everything, because I've done it. I had 100% deviated septum, and I've fixed my deviated septum without any surgery, just through restorative breath exercises and taping my mouth when I sleep at night.
That is like that is wild. Just to yeah, just to think. I mean, yeah, that's crazy to think about it like that. Especially when you put in perspective of it can start from so young. Like you said yourself, your mother smoked during pregnancy, so I mean, it's happening right away. And then if you're not fixing that problem, for myself, yeah, I mean, you could go 30, 40, 50 years of this one thing that you're doing all day, every day,
That's
and then
right.
it's just causing everything else. That's super cool.
Yeah.
How does someone get to find you then? So, they have whatever the issue is. Do they find you online or how do they find how do are they do you work with like different consultants or how do they find you and the business that you're doing?
I'm listed on a number of websites, but my Instagram channel only has about 36,000 followers, but it's breath underscore verse, VERSE. And my website is quantumfitness.org. And I offer 30-minute free consultations to people that really want to overhaul their breathing, because breathing, like you just said, is the most overlooked aspect of life, and it is the most important aspect of life. So if we're not breathing well, nothing else is going well. And I always tell my students lovingly, you don't know how good you don't feel.
You don't know how good you don't I love it. I love it. That's fantastic. That's super cool. What is their response when you hit them with, all right, step one is taping your mouth shut at night and using hostage tape or using this specific tape? What's typically their response? Are they receptive? I know they're coming to you, so they're obviously searching for a solution, but are they receptive? Are they wary of that? Do they get nervous?
I would say about 50% are wary of it, but I tell them that you can't choke, you can't throw up. Everybody's had food poisoning, and it usually happens at night. So
Right.
when you wake up in the middle of the night, you don't vomit in your sleep. You wake up to vomit. So God forbid there was anything wrong, your body would wake you up before you had that signal that you were going to die. Your brain will
Right.
wake you up. And it's the same thing with taping your mouth. If you're starting to struggle breathing while you sleep, and it does happen for people, well, the brain wakes you up. because it means that your oxygen levels have dropped below 50%. And that's the only time that oxygen becomes the neural drive to breathe. So if they have a need to wait to take the tape off, they're literally in their sleep, they're going to reach up and they're going to pull it off. I have students telling me I wake up with it in my hand or
Right.
it's in bed, and I go, okay, that's good. So you kept it on for a certain period of time. Do it again tonight. Keep doing it because you're going to get to a point where all of a sudden you don't have to take it off anymore. And that's because your brain will neurologically learn how to breathe through its nose the entire night you sleep.
That's really cool because we get a lot of feedback of I'm taking this off and it'll be a couple days in and people will say, "Hey, it works great. It stays on. I fall asleep." But in the middle of the night, I'm ripping it off without really realizing it. And that's really neat. I know for myself that happened the first few times and I just kept plugging away and just kept plugging away. I was like, "Okay, I need to get through this. I want to get through this." But yeah, we get a lot of feedback of, "Hey, I've ripped it off the last 2 nights. What should I
Well,
do? How do I stop? How do I
the
stop
reason
myself from doing that?"
the reason they're ripping it off is because they're already struggling to breathe. They're already presenting dysfunctional breathing. That's the only reason they take it off, because they're not breathing well when they're awake and they're not breathing well when they're sleeping.
Right. So what do you recommend to someone who is ripping it off? Is it stick with it? Is it practice more during the day of just focusing on having your mouth closed and deep, slow breaths through your nose? What are the
That's
kind of things you recommend?
Yep. Well, that's what I teach in my classes is I teach people how to establish 100% nasal breathing all the time, including during exercise. You should never open your mouth to breathe unless you're talking or eating. And I mean never. So if you can't breathe through your nose when you're exercising, you're creating dysfunction in your body because you're heavily breathing and your mouth has zero functions when it comes to breathing. And then once you establish nasal breathing during the day, it's going to be much easier to breathe through your nose while you're sleeping. But the tape it goes hand in hand.
Right.
You might not be doing it during the day, but you need to do it at night. You might not be doing it at night, but you need to do it during the day. So it's kind of a marriage between the two. Learning to breathe at all times when you're awake through your nose, and then you'll establish breathing through the nose 100% of the time when you're sleeping.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm now just hitting you with questions, trying to learn as much as I can here.
Yeah.
The exercise one I find is really fascinating because that's something that I have been doing. I'm going to say the last like 3 months or so is trying to really focus on just nasal breathing. And I can get it if I'm lifting weights or doing, I guess doing something that's not as high intense or that's getting my heart rate up quite as much. I just go back about a week ago. I was skipping, just jump rope, and I put on some mouth tape because I was finding whenever I was trying to do that, I'd always just almost panic and then just open my mouth up. So I was like, all right, I'll throw on some mouth tape and do the skipping. And I could just feel my anxiety just ramping up and ramping up. And I'd probably jump maybe 15 seconds and then I'd have to take a minute break just to almost calm down. And then I'd try it. And I did that for about 10 minutes. And so of the 10 minutes, the longest I skipped for was maybe 15, 20 seconds. And I just have to stop. Is that something that you see and then you slowly just keep building and building and building? Or is a high intensity workout something where it's like maybe that's a time where you need to mouth breathe or yeah, how do you navigate that?
No, it's never a time to mouth breathe. What's happening is people are overstressing themselves and they're creating hyperventilation effect. So what you need to do is you need to slow down your exercise so you don't feel the need to open your mouth. But we're taught, breathing heavily is like wearing a badge of honor on your sleeve.
Right.
When you're breathing heavily, you're getting a good workout, but that's because nobody ever taught us about breathing. So when you're exercising, if you get to the point where you can't keep your mouth closed, you either need to slow down or stop because you
Right.
want to make 1% adaptations every day. You're not supposed to kill yourself in the gym. That's old school thinking. And I'm changing paradigms. I'm teaching athletes not to destroy themselves, that they need to be able to. Your exercise, your breathing should dictate how hard you exercise and never the other way around. because
Right.
no cheetah runs with its mouth open. No antelope tries to get away with from the cheetah with its mouth open, and no horse runs a race with its mouth open.
That's the really cool thing. I like that. That makes a lot of sense, and I like how you brought in the animals because I mean I'm a big sports guy and I love watching NBA, NFL, NHL, whatever it is. And one thing that I've noticed is when they show, they'll like pan to the bench and you'll see all the players kind of just doubled over, and almost all of them have their mouth just open and they are panting.
Yeah,
And I'll do like I play men's league soccer or hockey or different things, but I'm trying to slowly work into a point where when let's say hockey, when I go back to the bench, I need to slow it down. I need to take a couple deep breaths. And it almost feels like I'm going to suffocate for the first 20 seconds where it's like, oh man, I need air. And then once you do it, you just feel so much calmer. Or soccer, same thing, where it's keep my mouth closed unless I'm like talking or calling for a pass, whatever it is. But yeah, it's cool looking even at those high level athletes, and they'll pan to the bench, and everyone's just hunched over, mouth open, they're panting up and down. And now, since getting into nasal breathing, I just want to go in there and be like, look, you got to close your mouth. You got to close your mouth. But
yeah,
that's neat that you're actually working with them.
yeah. I'm working with NHLers, MLBers, NFLers, and I got them establishing nasal breathing all the time. And the most important aspect is that, let's say you're on the ice and it's a 40-second shift. If you really need to open your mouth, you can, but that's because you've trained all the time nose breathing. So then when you open your mouth on the ice, it's almost like you get a breath of fresh air. Not
Right.
meaning it's good for you, but it allows you to offload the carbon dioxide that you're producing. And then as soon as you get on the bench, I teach very specific exercises to normalize breathing through the nose. That way you can, number one, you can recover as fast as possible. And number two, you can listen to instructions from your coach. And number three, you reduce performance anxiety at the end of the game, because if you're hyperventilating, you're going to get gassed out. And as soon as an athlete gets gassed out, when your legs go numb on the ice, you know you're done. You're
Yeah.
like, how am I going to keep up with this guy? So I teach athletes how to overcome all of those issues.
Right. And that's neat that you brought up the gassed out as well. Because hockey's the one sport I find that there's a moment where you hit it and it's not, the will to move is still there, but it's almost like your body is just totally unresponsive.
Yep.
And you can be doing wind sprints, whatever it is. You're just like, I can't move.
Yeah.
I literally can't push with my skate. And it feels like it feels like your legs are numb. It feels like you can't do anything. So I
Yep.
know exactly what you're talking about when you say get gassed out. I find hockey's the one where it's just like, look, like I can't move even if I wanted to. Something's wrong. And it's just that, yeah, that's really neat that you bring that
I
up.
just began training a 25-year-old phenom on the Ottawa Senators as a defenseman,
Okay.
and he's great, but he struggled a lot with injuries. So this year is going to be a big year for him, because he's going to learn to breathe, and he's going to learn to, be able to conserve energy and have the ability to fire on all cylinders at the end of the game when everybody else is tired. He's the one who's not going to be tired, because if you're training correctly, then you shouldn't get tired in a game.
Right.
You shouldn't, But like you said, you see everybody doubled over.
Hmm.
Well, are they training incorrectly? Probably not, because they know what to do. So what's the denominator that's causing them to heavily breathe and not be able to make it to the end of the game? Well, they're everyday breathing mechanics. And Patrick, you would be a good student. You should book a 30-minute call with me, and I can really help you.
Yeah, hey, I might just do that. This is just super fascinating. And right now in my head I'm going through all the demon on the Senators, just trying to guess which one you have. There's one at the top of my list I won't name drop, but there's one where I'm like, I think it's probably that guy. But that's really fascinating. And I always like listening to MMA commentary, and as well again with the athlete thing they talk about once an athlete, once a fighter, their mouth opens up, it's like okay, now they're in trouble
Yeah.
because you know that they're more anxious. They're not able to keep going as long as they want to. So
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just really cool. That's fascinating to think about, and just the science, and it's neat to see it all progressing. So that's
Yeah,
really
I work
really
with a
interesting.
couple of legends. Jordan Burroughs, six-time world champion wrestler,
Right.
just recently started working with MMA legend Alistair Overeem.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. That
They see me on Instagram and they see the things I put out and they're like, okay, this is the next level. This guy's saying things I've never heard before and I want to learn more. And again, breathing will be the new health revolution.
mhm,
Hands down, it will be the new health revolution. And for athletes, if you're not in command of your breathing, you're leaving performance on the table.
right. And what I like about, you just said it's like the new revolution. What I really found cool about James Nestor's book was it's the new science of the lost art. And I always think back to like yoga videos. I don't do yoga often, but every now and then I'll throw in a yoga video. But it's always deep inhale through your nose, exhale, and then it's always focused on nasal breathing. And
Yeah.
it's just that old tradition that's come up, and it's been lost, and now it's slowly being rediscovered, and through people like yourself doing that work, that, like you said, I mean, it's going to be the next big thing. And if it can clear up all those problems, I mean, you mentioned ADHD, that's a huge one right now.
Yeah. I,
If it can help with that, I mean, that's incredible.
I had an 8-year-old student in Australia who's 11 now, and he's set the when he was 9, he set the Australian world record in the 5K, and I taught him how to nasal breathe, and he was ADD. They told him he couldn't sit still in class, and I told his parents that once he learns to breathe well, you're going to watch. He's going to come out and you're going to find things about him that you never knew. And he's turned into a prolific writer. Not only is he a prolific runner, which I
Wow.
believe that he will be an Olympic champ when he's like 16, he's a prolific writer. And he's now like a model kid in school
Right.
because every child that is presenting some form of hyperactive disorder, it's because they're over breathing. They're not breathing. So it creates the fight or flight response. And they don't know how to voice their opinion. Where an adult will say, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. The child doesn't know that. And if you get them learning to breathe through their nose, it goes away.
That is so incredible. Just the insight into that fight or flight mentality and how a child isn't able to express it. I have I have a little boy who's about to turn 4, and then another guy who's a year and a half. So two little boys, and I'm always trying to do different things to get them. I just want them to have the habit. So myself personally, I know my earliest memory is, I think, grade 4, where the teacher told me to close my mouth.
Really?
I responded with a smart aleck reply of, "Well, I won't be able to breathe if I do that." So that's my earliest memory, and I got in trouble for it because I was being a smart ass. So, but that's my one memory of me saying I can't breathe through my nose. So grade 4 till about I was 28, I was a mouth breather.
Amazing.
So that's around 19 years of mouth breathing. And now I'm just trying to make sure that my boys don't have that same problem. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I had cold induced asthma. I
Yeah.
think probably deviated septum. I had whatever it was, you name it, poor dental health, all these things. I brush, floss, still have a ton of cavities. But I'm trying
Yeah.
to do things with my guys. So I'll check them at night. And if their mouth is open, I'll just pinch their lips closed, making
Sure.
sure that they're chewing with their mouth closed, those sorts of things, always telling them to close their mouth if I just see it open. But
Yeah.
it's just so fascinating to think ADD is, I mean, it's rampant now. So many people seem to be diagnosed with ADD, and
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense when you
Yeah.
just think about, if they're always in fight or flight, that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense why they'd be struggling with that.
And if we think about athletics for children, it's unfortunate. You'll get 20 kids in a practice, and there'll be 3 or 4 kids that can't do what everybody else does. And
Hmm.
then coach will try to help them, but then it'll come to a point where they're paying more attention to the good kids and they're yelling more at the kids that can't keep up, but they can't breathe. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean they're bad athletes or that they're not trying. But once they can't breathe, they shut down and they don't know how to express themselves. So if we looked at the child who's not performing well and we looked at their breathing, we could actually really help a lot of the child population, and we could
Right.
help them grow and grow into the humans that they deserve to be, which is a calm and beautiful person that doesn't need special attention except for learning to breathe through their nose.
Right. Man, this is just hitting home in so many ways. I feel like I've just been yelled at in practices growing up. You're panting for breath, gasping for air, the coach is yelling, and you almost want to say, "Look, I have no idea what you're saying right now. You can
Right,
scream at me as much as you want, but I feel like I'm going to just fall over and pass out because I can't get any air in."
right.
And it's like it doesn't matter what you say or how you say it. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to survive this next minute before it almost feels like you're about to suffocate. So that
yeah.
this is just hitting home
The
so
coach
much for
only
me.
knows how to train you physically. They don't know how to look at your physiology.
Right.
And it's always no pain, no gain, or you have to work harder than your opponent, and that's not true. I have to work as hard as I can for my own metabolic requirements. I
Right.
can only give as much as my body can give in the moment. So again, I'm trying to change paradigms with elite athletes and children where we're caregivers instead of brutalizing them and not making them feel lesser than. And it's because they can't breathe. So we really need to pay more attention to their how they breathe.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now you're spreading this message. Are you finding that it is slowly growing? You said you've been mouth taping the last 5 years. Is it something that you're seeing is picking up steam, or is it still like the same kind of slow roll that it has been? What are you predicting in the next 5 years in terms of breathing and breathing correctly and eliminating all these issues?
Yeah. It's gaining a lot of steam because I would say at the beginning of this year, I had 14,000 Instagram followers and now I have 36.
Right.
And it took me years to get to 14,000. And then I went from 14 to 36 because of all the information I'm putting out on breathing. So within 3 to 5 years, everyone's going to know about breathing. So get in now because now people will have an edge on their competition until everybody starts, because it's like the workout of the day, the fad of the day,
Right.
like ice, like drinking your urine. I mean, all of these fads,
Yeah.
right? So breathing is not a fad yet. And again, I don't do breath work because there is no work in breathing. You have to restore your functionality,
Hmm.
and once you restore your functionality, you wind up becoming the best version of yourself. And a lot of the consultations I do are with people in their 20s. Again, I look at it on a more of a spiritual level. If I can teach a 20-year-old how to breathe correctly, when they grow up and they become a parent, their physiology is in good shape,
Right.
they're going to break generational trauma just from being able to breathe well. They're not going to have these self-limiting beliefs because as you build your tolerance to carbon dioxide, you wake up every day feeling well, and you can break generational trauma just by learning to breathe well. And then when you become a parent, you're going to impart wisdom on your children, and those children that are being born into the new energies of the earth, the new earth, they're going to grow up and they're going to literally physically and physiologically change the entire dimension of our existence.
Right. Yeah, that is, I mean, that's just so powerful what you're saying. This is something that is just so powerful. It's so important. So few people are aware of it, but it's inspiring to hear you talk and just say how it's growing and it's taking off and you're changing that generational trauma. This is just so inspiring. It's so awesome. It's so
Thank,
cool.
thank you.
I'm gonna let you run. We'll end it there. But this has been really cool to be able to talk to you for the past 30 minutes. I'd just like to say thank you so much for this. Before I go, could you say again where people can find you and hear about your work and um, yeah, where can people find you?
Well, my name is Bryan with a Y, Mirabella, My website is quantumfitness.org because breathing is energy. So quantum, right? So we're
Right.
changing brainwave states. And then, so it's easy to find me on quantumfitness.org and then Instagram, breath_verse.
Breath_verse. All
Same,
right.
same TikTok. But
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much for this, Bryan. Again, we really appreciate it. This has been really cool. And it's just so awesome that people like you are out there and spreading this message. So thank you so much.